Hello, everyone. I'm Major Mohammed Ali Shah, and it's my proud privilege to welcome a very esteemed, a very renowned, a very special guest with us who needs no introduction at all. You all know him, you all admire him, and he is looking after the best and the biggest film festivals across the globe. Apart from being the man behind the Teamwork Arts, which he founded in 1989 and he took it to where it is today, we all know. Apart from the Jaipur Lit Fest, which you most of us really greatly admire, he looks after, he designs, produces, and he's directed 33 international festivals, cultural annual festivals rather. Sorry, across 43 or 42 cities in 17 different countries and many more. A man who needs no introduction. I would just straight away come straight away to our dearest, esteemed guest, Sanjoy Roy. Sanjay, thank you for sparing time and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Major. It's always my pleasure to speak with you. I'm a great admirer of everything that you've achieved, and not just your family name, but really what you stand for. And I do hope that your conversation or conversations that you do help push back the hatred that many of us now know is consuming not just us in India, but across the world.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Sanjay, let's start from your childhood. We know of the fact of you went to St. Stephen's and then you did your law and 1989 you started teamwork arts and but before that, something which very few people would be knowing. Let's talk about you as a child. Were you always inclined towards the arts? Or how was it? How were you like as a student?
Pretty much so, Major. I was always sort of enthused in the arts. When I was studying in London, for example, I used to play the violin or pretend to be learning to play the violin and the recorder. When I came back to India and went to study in Bombay at the cathedral in John's Convent School, my world was primarily theater and elocution. Mr. Jeffries used to be our theater and elocution teacher, and that's really where my introduction to this world was. And both sides of my family were immersed in the arts in some way or the other. They were great supporters of the arts. So, in many ways, this was a natural to continue to be part of this world. And then when I came to Delhi in the late 70s in 1977 and finished my schooling at Delhi Public School, Mathura Road. It was Prem Krishnan, who was the head of theatre at Delhi Public School, Mathura Road. And she was like, she was amazing, an amazing mentor. And I spent more time out of class doing theatre with her than I did, doing any kind of studies. And that then followed with, admission into St. Stephen's College, and where Vijay Tanka, who was, professor in the philosophy department, he used to be part of Barry John's theatre action group, and Abha Sood, who was then the principal of Lady Shri Ram College, was casting for Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Frank. And Vijay told me, Tanks told me, go for casting. So I went for my first audition, and Diary of Anne Frank was my first sort of semi-professional appearance on the LSR stage. And roughly from there, I went on to join Theatre Action Group. They were doing a new production called Amadeus, which had just been written, and it was a fabulous production. And from there, I went on to manage TAG, and then finally ended up being its executive director for many years. And and our whole idea when we set up first Stack TV and then Teamwork Films and Teamwork Arts was how do we find employment for our colleagues in theatre so that they had a day job and they could earn, as well as that they could then do their theatre in the evening. So that's how Teamwork was actually set up. That was the motivation. And I met my to be wife in TAG, Punita, and then to be father-in-law, when we decided to get married, sort of asked me, "What do you do, young man?" And I said, I work in the arts. I'm in theater. So he said, "No, no, what's your day job?" So I'm like, no, no, this is my day job, and I pay myself 1,000 rupees a month. And so he said, how are you going to support my daughter? And I was like, no, 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 hold on. Your daughter is the manager in a big firm, so she's going to be supporting us. Right? I'm the artist. But needless to say, he wasn't enthused at all about that particular conversation. And as television had just opened up at that point of time. Doordarshan had just started giving the slots, and there was no television professionals, so people used to look to us in theater to produce or program or direct or act in their shows. And Bobby Bedi, who then went on to make the Bandit Queen and so many other films. Bobby had got a couple of slots from Doordarshan, and he used to come to me ever so often to pick my brains and say, what should we do? How should we do this? And then he kept saying, come and join me and direct and produce a couple of shows. And then finally, closer to the wedding, I sort of agreed to do that and then worked with Bobby for 2 years before Mohit and I set up Tag TV and then Teamwork.
That's what a journey. How commendable is that? And Bandit Queen came about in the mid 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, I think Manchu Dhulia was doing the casting and Shikhar Kapoor was directing. And in fact, Bobby Bedi, as a producer, he did a fabulous job in that. So tell us, in 1989, when you founded the Teamwork Arts, of course, you did it with Namita together. How was it?
No, actually, Teamwork Arts was founded by me and Mohit Satyanand, who's my partner, and he's the
Of
chairman
course,
of our
right.
board right now. And Teamwork Arts, like I said, was founded primarily, as a television company to provide employment to our colleagues in theatre. And for those 5 or 6 initial years till 1995, we were primarily a film company. So we were Teamwork Films. So we made films and television serials, and because television had opened up in such a big way, Major, that by 1995, 96, we had 14 different daily soap operas or game shows or food shows or news programs or puppet programs. Everything from Tolmol Ke Bol, which was the first game show on ZTV, to Newsline, which was the first sort of serial which looked at the inner workings of a news magazine, all the way to Chuna Lagake, which was a puppet show, and the Indian Spice Trail, which went on to be dubbed in many different languages. It was a wonderful food show that I used to host. So in those days, as you know, there was no sense of a season. So if you had a show that was successful, it ran every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So most of our shows had been running for 5 or 6 years, and all our shooting used to happen in the Noida Film City across the different studios there, which where our sets used to be built in, and we used to be staging these. And in those days, because there was no concept of a season, Major, all my colleagues had to wake up at the crack of dawn. There was no D&D, so you drove out to Film City. You finished at very late at night. You drove back and came back. And every Saturday afternoon, I used to have these meetings with all our producers and directors in terms of agle hafte kya plan hai. Oh, what's going to be the focus of the new episode, what's our focus of the new show. And it was in one of those meetings, two of my colleagues, Manika Berry and Sharpa Datta, came and said, listen, we can't do this anymore. Television is cruel. It doesn't allow us a personal life. And in a moment of weakness, I sort of said, TK, if we don't want to do it, let's go back to the arts, forgetting for a second that we were used to notionally making money every hour on the hour. So we told all of the channels, and they were very upset with everything, that fact that we wanted to stop our shows, which were very lucrative for them. And but we did. It took us 6 months. We nearly went bankrupt, uh, but then we moved slowly towards the arts in 1995, 96. The Jaipur Literature Festival, which Namita, William, and I put together, that was much later. That was, in the mid 2000s that came about. And that's a completely different story.
Mohit, I read an article by Mohit in one of the journals long back, over 10 years back, that how you should just follow your passion, do what you want to do. You only live once. No point, burning yourself out in a job which you do not enjoy. And that is, let me tell you, Sanjay, that prompted me to quit my regular 9 to 5 job. And when I met him at your Jaipur Lit Fest in the year 2019, I saw this tall gentleman, handsome gentleman. I walked up to him and said, I need to thank you. I read your article, and that's how I got the courage to quit my job. Sanjay, you have studied in the best college in India, I would say, St. Stephen's, and then you went on to do your law. And often they say that a lawyer has to be very articulate if he has to present his point and put forward his argument in a very strong way. And you, I think, I would rate you as one of the best speakers I have come across. So tell me, had you pursued law full time as a profession, Advocate Sanjay Roy? So how?
Not at all, Major. What happened, about law fac in those days was, in Delhi University. It was prestigious place to study, but I was too busy doing theater, so I never really attended any class. So a friend of mine, Tina, Shruti Panwar, now Shruti Panwar, and Shobha. They used to do notes, send it to me. I used to read them up and go and do my exams. So I did my exams till the fifth semester. And the fifth semester, the choice was, it was exam time, got to law fac, but I needed to take a dump desperately. And there was no way I was going to law fac lose because they were just costly. So I used to normally go off to the Oberoi Maidens or the Oberoi back in Delhi. So the choice was take a dump, take the exam. So I decided the dump was more priority. So I stopped. The fifth semester was the last semester that I did, and then I dropped out of law fac. I didn't finish my law, and then theater just continued. By which time I was pretty much doing. We were doing street theater, we were doing lots of protests, we were getting locked up, all of that kind of stuff. So the trajectory of my life then primarily became the arts. So yes, I still have a pretty sharp legal mind. So I do a lot of I look at all our documents, etc. But I never completed law per se, and was never a practicing lawyer. Though I remember a Jyotishi once told my parents that he should do two things. He should either become a lawyer or become a spiritual guru. Luckily, I didn't become either.
You would have made a very good spiritual guru, actually, I would say, Sanjoy. That's
Well,
something.
I certainly have the hair. I certainly have the hair, Major. And I suspect there's more money in it.
In 2010, I was, in fact, I have a very similar story to yours. In fact, it's very similar in the sense I draw a lot of inspiration not only from when Mohit said, but your journey as well. So I used to be found more in doing theater than in my classroom. When I went to Pune, I was more at the Film Institute Pune than in my own college. So it's something very similar there. Now, tell me, Sanjay, that you would have had your fond memories of plays and such things. Which was the first play that you did, and how old were you at that time?
I think the first play that I remember, of course, through college, you're a tree or a bunny rabbit or whatever. But the first play I remember, I was in. It was in London. It was our class production. I don't remember exactly what I did, but it was a lovely play, and that in many ways was my introduction. And thereafter, it was really in Delhi Public School, where because in Cathedral one acted and did a lot of elocution, because that was the focus. And the year I was supposed to start acting Mr. Jeffries as Caspi in this lead role, I transferred to Delhi because my parents were very keen that I came to Delhi to study, so that university in Delhi became the sort of prime target. And so it was really Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde that Mrs. Krishnan directed at Delhi Public School, Mathura Road. And then we went on to do Girish Karnad's Tughlaq, which was again, I played Tughlaq. It was an iconic production, something that I will never forget, because of the kinds of lines that it was, and the experience that it was. It was just amazing to be out there and perform with all my fellow students. It was very special, and the magic. There was one night, one of the many performance night. In theater, as you know, there's that one night that magic takes over, and you can't replicate that magic. You can always aspire to that magic, but you can never replicate it. And that magic, where where you felt that, I felt that I was, Tughlaq, and the play took over, and there was this other energy, and I think the audience responded to that. And as theater people, all of us always aspire for that one magical day, which will completely transform and be so wonderfully motivating and magical, that you always try and replicate it.
Absolutely. Importance of Ernest and Tughlaq both are wonderful plays. In fact, the importance of being earnest. Lady, what was the name? The character, Lady Blackwell, if I'm not mistaken. And when they were found in the handbag at the railway station, and it's a amazing play. And Tughlaq, I remember the part where तुम्हारी उम्र कितनी है 19 का हूँ हुजूर उमंगो भरी उम्र है that's an amazing speech in fact. Now Sanjay, tell me, when you founded uh, the Teamwork Arts, so
Mm.
what were the challenges you faced at that time? And so to set up any new creativity, I mean, there are a lot of challenges there.
Major, when you set up something, as you've taken the plunge and you've done so many amazing things. Your uncle, Nasiruddin Shah, as well, has done so many amazing things. You don't really think about the challenge. You just look at, what do you need to do next. And when we set up, first it was called TAC TV, and then it was called Teamwork Films. We were pretty, because meanwhile, one of the things that I was also involved with Salam Balak Trust looking after street kids, that Mira's mother, Mrs. Nair, and I set up in, again, roughly the same time as Teamwork, 1989. And we were very clear that everything that we wanted to do within the larger social development sector. So a lot of the films that we were doing were looking at campaigns for health, for tuberculosis, for diarrhea. We were working with UNICEF, uh, and also doing, I mean, because I'd already done ads with Bobby, many of the ads were award winning ads for KLM Cargo, etc. One came to this world with a degree of experience. Mohit himself had been with Hindustan Levers, he had set up Uncle Chips, he then had set up this ad company. So it wasn't, yes, I was very young at that point of time. I think I was 26 or 27, but it wasn't necessarily this thing of, oh, we're setting up a startup. It wasn't a startup. It was really, what can we do to bring about a degree of change. And of course there are challenges. How do you make money, how do you generate business, how do you create opportunities. But much of the learning, as you know, Majors, was really on the job. You make mistakes, you learn. You create new products, you learn. I remember the first episode of Tol Mol Ke Bol, or the first four episodes of Tol Mol Ke Bol. Our camera director, Arun Sethi, had miscalculated the lighting for it. And when we were at the edit table, it was very dark, and I had to take these tapes and go to Bombay, because in those days, you had to take the tapes physically. And Z had just opened, and we were doing this for Z. And this is, now we're talking about 1989, 1990, and the riots in Bombay had just happened and was happening. And I was staying with Shahrukh, who had been part of our theatre company. So Shahrukh said, "I will drive you," and we were driving down Tulsi Pipe Road with stuff burning on both sides. These, big shivers were being announced. And through the riots, I actually got to SL House in Worli, which is these headquarters. And I went to meet Lakshmi Laroya, who was our executive producer. And the very fact that one surmounted all the odds, and despite everything was able to get there with the tapes, good, bad, ugly, you know, was a big difference. And they realized that we too had a commitment like they had, in terms of getting something out on time. And therein began a long journey. And then we learned, because obviously, television was new. Television was new for them. Television was new for us. India television was new. I had come with a degree of experience because I'd directed for Bobby Bedi, Telefun, hundreds of episodes across the country. So one had that experience, but you learned. So every time you did something, you learned. And today when people turn to me from different parts of the world or different countries, and I sit on many advisory boards primarily because I've got long hair, Major, rather than what I think. The knowledge one is able to give them, or the instinct with one, which with one, with which one is able to advise people with, really comes from this understanding and learning from all the mistakes that one has done. So if you do a mistake and you learn from it, I think that's one of the biggest learning things, and you know this more than anybody else. That's how you learn. However, when you do a mistake and you try and cover it up and find an excuse that this wasn't my mistake, it's somebody else's mistake, which sadly is the default setting in most people, that's not learning. Really learning is, what is it that went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Take responsibility for your action, learn from it, and move forward. And that's a great life lesson. That's a great professional lesson. So that's what really held us in good stead, year after year, program after program, and has taken us to where we are. Much of it is accidental. Harvard Business School teaches a case study on us, saying that we had a 5 year and a 10 year and a 15-year plan to take over the world in the art space. It's not true. I mean, much of what's happened with us has been accidental. We've been at the right time, at the right place, and have made the investment, not necessarily saying that we're going to take home $1 million tomorrow morning. What has always motivated us is, you know, the aspect of being able to do something, do it well, and do something that brings about change, makes a difference, impacts people, and uses the arts, across the development sector to make that difference.
You're talking about your association with Shah Rukh Khan, it was a couple of years back, a few years back rather, where the premiere of Tube Light, Salman Khan's film. So Shah Rukh had come there with Imtiaz Ali. And Imtiaz, just sometime before that, was telling us so his association with you. The first time when he met you all in the afternoon, how it was, and so would like to hear. It was a very interesting anecdote that Imtiaz was sharing with us. So we would like to know your first meeting with Imtiaz.
My memory at the best of time, Major, is terrible. So I don't remember that first meeting necessarily. But, when you meet, I think the more interesting is the fact that when you meet anybody, and you sometimes you meet people out of context and you don't know who they are, and you certainly don't know their future journey in any sense of the word. But you're just meeting on a one to one as human beings, and you listen to each other, or you try and listen to each other and empathize, and where possible you provide support, if possible. And it's really that, a lot of people sort of say, you mentored Shah Rukh Khan. Of course I didn't. I have nothing to do with his journey. Yes, we were in the same theater group. Yes, he worked with, his first job was with us. Yes, we were both under hotel arrest at the Rambagh because we were shooting this big ad for KLM, and every morning, we used to go off to shoot this ad which had elephants and camels, and the forest department used to arrest us at some point of time. And then, Shah Rukh used to do some stuff, and that continued. But it's really a relationship. So whether it's Imtiaz or Shahrukh or Manoj Bajpayee or Divya Seth or Rituraj or Benny Thomas, all of us sort of go back to our world of theater, which was, as you know, it's a very different world. There, it's not about seniority or who's senior or who's junior or who's new. It's about talent, and it's about an exchange of energy, and it's about how do you work together. Theater is about working together, with the lighting person and the design person and the stage manager, and all of that. It's a complex collective process. It's really complicated, and at that point there's no understanding in terms of, oh, ye main nahi karunga. या ये
Ah,
छोटा काम है या ये बड़ा काम है.
right.
You do everything. You serve coffee, you run around, you pick up a costume, you do the set, you drive a car, you load, you unload. And it's really in that, whether it's in Imtiaz or Shahrukh or whoever, that bonding that happens, then lives on for life, and you're connected for life like that. So it's not necessarily that I'm on, I'm chatting with any of these people 24/7, but when we do meet or when we do exchange stuff, it's like nothing has changed.
You left from where you had, where you start from
Time
where you
has
had left.
passed.
Absolutely.
You
Rituraj is,
Well, even that's difficult today, because everybody's trajectories have changed and we've all changed. And of course, each of us come with a different baggage, a different experience, and so it's not about starting off from where you left off last time. It's coming to the table knowing that you've journeyed, but you still have a bond and relationship which allows you the freedom. I remember Karan Johar once saying to me, I think we were sitting in Sharukh's and Gauri's home in London, and Karan said, he said, I always envy the way you speak to Shahrukh, because I can never do that. Of course, because he was younger. He came to know Shah Rukh in a completely different way, than the way we know each other, or with Imtiaz or with Manoj or any of the other people. So it's different. And I mean, that, how this world works. So, relationships are different. And I think as long as you are aware that relationships also need working upon, it's not automatic. And you need to make an investment in a relationship, and that's how relationships are made. And you must ensure that a relationship is an equal relationship, not not an imbalanced one. That's how you continue to manage your relationship and your emotion with that person.
so you, Rituraj, Shahrukh, Manoj Bajpayee, Barry, at the same time, you were all together doing theatre at the same time.
That's right. So Barry was the creative director of Theatre Action Group. I was its executive director. Rituraj was one of our older tag members. Rituraj, and of course there was Lilet Dubey, there's Siddharth Basu, there was Rohit Khosla, who was this amazing designer. There's Pam Rooks, who sadly died in an accident. Uh, so many of us. So there are many different generations of tag. Khalid Taibji and Vidyan Singh and Ravi Dubey and Alu. So that was the first generation. I was the second generation of tag to run tag, and then Ritz and Shahrukh and Manoj and all came later. Divya, Manoj came much later. Shahrukh came because we were doing a play at Lady Shriram College called in which Annie gives it. No, in Annie Get Your Gun, which was a musical,
Right.
and that's when Shahrukh had come for his auditions. Ritz had been one of our earlier actors, and he was sort of the hero of the stage, etc. So yeah, there are different sort of trajectories of actors that have passed through theatre action group.
Rituraj's father, in fact, he was a lieutenant in the army. He was a DG artillery, the same regiment that I am from. And of course, when I met him, we could connect so well. So much of funny things to exchange notes on. So tell us about how did the entire idea of the Jaipur Lit Fest come about, and how did you go about founding that, Sanjoy?
So that was purely accidental, Major. What happened is like I said, in 1995, 96, we stopped doing television and we moved to the arts. And it was also roughly at that time that my wife, Punita, we were holidaying in Goa and she had an accident. And, for a year, it was really, between hospitals and looking after her, etc. So I hadn't cut my hair. And one day, my eldest son, Aditya, came to me and said, "Are you planning to cut your hair? Are you planning to grow your hair?" So I said, "Why?" So he said, "If you grow your hair, you can't come to my school." So I'm going, "Yes!" So no more parent teacher meeting to be told what a bad parent you are, etc. And so I grew my hair, and my hair has always been somewhat more salt than pepper. And because we'd started working in the arts by that time, we commissioned we'd started something called Friends of Music. Mohit and Kanika and Val Shipley, who's sadly no more, they started Friends of Music, which we used to run, and that was very successful. And the Indian Oceans and the parikramas and the Silk routes, etc., emerged or found a platform there, and it was successful. So we did the same thing in dance. We asked people like Asta Debu and Daksha Sheth and Aditi Mangaldas, etc., to do stuff that was beyond their comfort zone. And some of that was fantastic. And then we commissioned new writing in theater with Kavita Nagpal and Sanjay Chauhan and so on and so forth. And, because I'd grown my hair by that time, a lot of the universities in the UK, they used to think I speak their language, I talk their staff, I know a little bit about the arts. So they used to ask me, invite me to come and lecture, and I used to be part of the British Council training program for arts managers. So that created a network for us in the UK. And whenever I traveled, and I traveled a lot, I used to see that, you saw amazing work and a lot of rubbish as well from across the world, but very little from India in the mainstream platforms, the Edinburgh festivals, the Cheltenhams, Brighton, etc. And I was very keen that we took some of our best work from India to these platforms. So in 2000, 2001, we set up a big platform at the Edinburgh festivals, across the Edinburgh Literature Festival, Music Festival, Festival Fringe, the Edinburgh Tattoo, so on and so forth. And that was very successful because we branded it as celebrating India. And normally, if you were in the international festival, you didn't go to the fringe. If you're in the festival fringe, you didn't go to the international festival. But we just did it across all festivals. And people were like, wow. And ek baar safed chhap lag jata hai to, the rest of. So in Singapore just invested 1.3 billion into its arts infrastructure and its economy. They were looking for arts companies to set up. One of our colleagues, Shweta, who set up, who went to Singapore with her husband, set up Teamwork Production. So that was our first international office. And during that time, Faith and John Singh from Anokhi, the block print, lovely retail people. So they had come out to Edinburgh, and Faith and John had been doing a lot of work in terms of restoration and preservation of built heritage in Jaipur. That restored in the old city of Amer, beautiful site, an old gate, etc., with which has got the Anokhi Museum right now. And when they came and saw the way that the Edinburgh festivals was, in the sense of everything is done is in a heritage building, in an old church, in a community hall, in some of the old buildings, in the basements, in toilets, in garages, but all heritage structures. They were very keen to replicate that in Jaipur. And they were like, you have to come and help us set up a festival. So I helped them set up the Jaipur Virasat Heritage Festival. And there was like, you have to run it. And I said, no, we don't understand Jaipur. So we won't run it, but we'll just help you set it up. And we help them set it up. And every year we used to produce something in that larger festival. But sadly, that festivals, for the because of the nature of the beast that festivals are, it didn't get very far, and it started losing a lot of money. And it was going to close down. And John and Faith sort of called and said, this was your baby. How can you allow your baby to shut down? You have to take it over. And I wasn't very keen to take on the whole festival. Meanwhile, Namita and William had started a small literature segment within that larger festival. So we took that segment and created what we know today as the Jaipur Literature Festival. So it was one of these accidents, and Jaipur happened. If I'd done a dipstick survey, will Jaipur become the city where the world's largest literary gathering will happen? Everybody would have laughed. But it's true. Heritage cities are amazing, and so Delhi will never be a festival city. London is not a festival city, but Edinburgh is. Paris can never be a festival city, but Avignon is. Similarly, Delhi can't necessarily be a festival city, but Jaipur can. This proximity to Delhi, the infrastructure that it has, its international airport, the hotels that it has, the beautiful palaces and forts, which makes it, one of the most incredible festivals. adding to which the Indian hospitality, which is amazing, and our food, and there's music, and there's retail, and 80% of our audiences are young people. So it's a very special festival where we use knowledge to again, create considered information and push back on hatred, which by and large comes from ignorance of different religions, of color, of caste, of prejudices. But we need much more. And so, one of the things that I feel very proud about, that we all feel very proud about, is the fact that there are 300 odd other festivals that have started taking inspiration from Jaipur. And I hope we have thousands of these, because every festival will allow for considered information and knowledge, local writing, different languages, different cultures, different traditions, different religions. And the more we do of that, perhaps by showing, by providing that window of opportunity that allows you to look at a different philosophy and culture and tradition, maybe we'll be able to push back on ignorance and hatred.
Exactly. Today, the Jaipur Lit Fest is the biggest festival. I remember I read when I guess it was 2008, when you were standing outside Darbar Hall at the Jaipur Lit Fest and you were thinking, पता नहीं ये hall भरेगा कि नहीं, पता नहीं लोग आएंगे कि नहीं. I hope people turn up over here. And today we know people come from different countries. They take special bookings, special reservations, special holidays, special leaves, just so that they do not miss the Jaipur Lit Festival. And that is not just by accident, Sanjoy. I would differ there. I would say it's by passion. I mean, the way it is your baby. You worked so hard on it. And of course, as Paulo Coelho said in The Alchemist, if you truly desire something from the bottom of your heart, the whole universe conspires to get it together for you. And the whole universe did conspire. You are handling festivals, cultural festivals, international festivals in 17 countries, 42 cities. I mean,
No,
33 annual festivals. Yes,
no, totally. As you rightly said right in the beginning, it's really about passion. And all my colleagues, I do very little. I'm the hair and I'm the face of much of what we do, sure. But in essence, it's really all my colleagues who run these festivals. I really am there to advise and help and guide, and do all of the other stuff. Um, but if you don't have passion, and if you don't have that, the joy of waking up and getting to your work, it's like somebody once asked me, how do you do so much? And I said, actually, I don't. And I don't necessarily see this as work. So there's no life work balance per se, because everything that I do is what I love doing. I mean, which other job, and again, this, which other job where you wake up, meet with so many interesting people, you travel across the world, and you see so much of amazing stuff, you work with amazing people. I mean, which other job will give you this opportunity to do that? And again, in terms of, when we set up a festival, whether it's in Turkey or Egypt or South Africa, all of these have happened, with a purpose. So in South Africa, for example, the Johannesburg, the city, when the apartheid regime gave way, and South Africa achieved independence from the apartheid regime, what happened is that South Africa opened its borders, and because it was the predominant economy in Africa, everybody flocked there, and everybody flocked there. But there wasn't that kind of business and opportunity. But there was lots of arms, as a result of which crime became the predominant theme in the central business district, which is Newtown in Johannesburg, and everybody moved out of Newtown, because the railway station and the bus stations used to be there. People used to spew out, and then, there was a lot of crime. You couldn't stand on the street without being mugged, or being shot at or whatever. So people moved out to Santon, to the suburbs, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that the city wanted was, how do you revive Newtown as a business district? And the two banks, Standard Bank and FNB, First National Bank, I told the city, you have to sort this out. So when we went there, and Ambassador Navdeep Suri invited me to come out to South Africa. Initially, in our usual prejudicial way, I was like, no way I'm coming. There's no flatbed. There's no direct flight. Aise log hai, many are our kind of stuff. But finally, I went for a day, and Navdeep had set up all of these amazing meetings. And Stephen Sachs, who was the head of the city, said, what can we do to revive the CBD? And we've done something similar in New York with Mayor Giuliani in the late 90s, I think, where there was a revival of what is now known as the village, where he had cleaned up the city. So what we said to Stephen Sachs, I said three things. I said one is you delineate a cultural district in Newtown. Ensure that there's great lighting and excellent policing. And I said, I promise you in 3 years' time, I'll walk across Mary Fitzgerald Square, which was, crime infested, with my mobile phone in my hand, and I won't be mugged. So we finish the meeting. We drive across the bridge towards the consul general's residence, and there's a smash and grab. They throw a stone, smash the windscreen, and then they try and grab you. And that's where it started from. But in 3 years' time, Major, everything changed. We were doing festivals in Mary Fitzgerald Square, galleries opened up, restaurants opened up, the old powerhouse was converted into a conference center, the museums came up. Today, it's a hub for new construction, for residential building. None of this is in any way rocket science, and that's how we set up the South Africa Festival. Going to Egypt, for example, again, Egypt had just gone through the Arab Spring, and Egypt depends, 67 or 70% on tourism. Tourism had stopped. People thought that it was unsafe. So again, the government reached out to and Navdeep happened to be our ambassador. And so, what did we do? We said, okay, let's try and find a way to show that Egypt is safe. So, we started the festival at the airport, at Terminal 1 or Terminal 2, which was their new terminal. So, our artists got off their flight, cleared immigration, they were taken to a room where they changed their clothes. And our first performance was in the terminal, which was covered by BBC and CNN and worldwide, and so on and so forth, just to show that Egypt was open, ready for business. So when we started in Chicago, for example, we did a lot of work in uh, in South Chicago, which is again hugely crime infested. There's a lot of shootouts, etc. It's a Latino and majorly black neighborhood. And one of the things we started doing with the city as part of our larger festival was, can we make a change in the neighborhood? So the city used to give us a screen and a popcorn machine and the projector. We used to do the workshops. We used to show films every weekend during the festival. And I remember this one time I was in this lawn. There's a link fence all around. Typically, what happens is the Latinos come to one side, set up their barbecue. The African Caribbean community come to the other side. The homeless and the drug people are at the back. And I was standing at the back talking to the homeless people, and I heard this popping sound. So I turned around and I saw that there was a drive by shootout where a car had shot a lady and the baby in the pram. So we stopped the film. I can't remember what the film was. We stopped the film, and I said to the community, I said, is this how you want to live? And why is it that you don't have trust? Why don't you set up something? So they set up the neighborhood watch, which made those blocks really safe. So you can use the art. So the arts is not just about music, theater, dance, nautanki, performance. It's about bringing about change, and that's what we do. That's what we use the arts for across the world, everywhere from Australia through to America and bits in between.
Sanjoy, in my exuberance of speaking to you in 2010, I had participated in something called a Short and Sweet Theatre Festival from Australia. Alex Brown had brought it over here, and I was performing at Epicenter in Gurgaon. And it was a 10 short performance. And the moment I saw you in the audience, I was overwhelmed. I was like, Sanjoy is here. And my energy levels went up further. Of course, you didn't know of my existence at that time. And then I was nominated for the best actor over there. And I was like, and I owe that to you. I mean, I saw you and I was like, the spirit that got into me was phenomenal. And then later on, of course, you tell me about your experience with the Meta, the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards. Because Anand Mahindra is incidentally from my school. He's my super senior from Lawrence School, Loveday. And I worked with Mahindras, in fact, before I quit my regular 9 to 5 job. So that's something I'm like very, very. There's a lot more and there's a lot to talk about with you. But there are few things which I've just picked up not even a handful of the kind of variety that you have been doing, Sanjay. So I'd like to know about Meta.
So Major, in the mid 60s, I used to go up to Lawrence School, Lovedale, because my brother Probir used to study there. He was in Lovedale for a couple of years, I think, till the eighth standard. So every time we used to go to drop him, to the train, went to Coimbatore, drove to Coimbatore, and then used to um, take the what's it called? What's the hill train called up to
The,
Ooty?
the, the, the toy train from Kunur, it goes to
Yeah,
Lovedale
yeah.
Station. Yeah.
That's right, the blue toy train. It was quite so. I loved Dale. I loved your buildings and so on. I think my brother loved it less, but I loved it a lot. And yeah, so Meta actually emerged out of a conversation that Ravi Dubey had with Anand Mahindra. Our whole thing has in theater has always been how can we create opportunities where um, theater professionals also are valued in the same way that film actors and film professionals are valued. And one of the things was that let's set up an award to recognize theater, which becomes the national award. So this is something that we then sat down and designed, and we said we had a couple of principles. I said let it be across languages, so it shouldn't have any divisions. It's not about whether it's English or Hindi or Sanskrit or Tamil or Malayalam or Bengali. I said theater is theater. Good theater knows no language, it cuts across the language barrier. So we said, irrespective, your best actor, you can be a best actor whether you're speaking in Tamil or in Assamese or you're silent or in Marathi or Gujarati. So that was our first principle across the board. Our second principle was that we will select the best from across the country. So we set up a selection process where our selection committee viewed the videos sent to us by theater groups from across the country. And then we realized that perhaps not everybody, and remember this is 15 years ago, I said not everybody may be able to afford to film or record their performance. So we used to give us a subsidy. We used to say, okay, if you have a good show, if you think you have a good show, we'll pay you to film it and send us the DVD. So this used to be seen by the selection committee. And then the nominations used to be done across categories. And we used to invite the 10 best plays to Delhi. And our third principle was that when the play came to Delhi, we would provide it the best possible infrastructure, whether it's lighting or sound or venue, etc., so that the play could be seen in the best possible way. And in the early years, Major, as you know, that the minute you said Assamese or Malayalam or whatever, we had very few audiences coming because language is tends to become alien. Now, of course, it doesn't matter because people realize that they will be seeing some of the good productions that you wouldn't otherwise have access to, and it's become a great festival. And I think the amazing thing is that many of the plays that have won Meta, we've been able to travel across the world, irrespective of language, and they've traveled and performed to standing ovations, whether it's in Shakespeare at the Globe Theatre or at the South Bank Center or in China or in Japan or in Russia or much of Europe or America. We've traveled a lot of these plays. I mean, Teamwork has traveled many of these award winning plays, even to the Edinburgh Festival, for example, and they've done really well. And I think what has happened is it's also given an impetus for new writing, which was our fourth principle. How do we encourage new writing in theater? So, in fact, the second highest award that we had is for writing, and then now if you win that award, we also publish your play. So, the idea was to try and make it as holistic as possible. And then when lockdown happened, Major, I think that was the other point. So in 2020, when the lockdown happened, it happened right when Meta is supposed to happen in March. So we took it all online, and our daily on-ground audience is about 1,200 people between, because we run three venues or two venues every day, or two or three shows every day. When we did it online, our shows have been watched by over 450,000 people at one time, and now it's gone to millions. So it's changed the way that we've been able to attract people, and I think that's been very exciting. The new, and we wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been uh, the lockdown. And through the year, we then started broadcasting the plays that we had recorded earlier. We started providing the groups whose plays it was a royalty so that they could survive through the COVID period, even though it was a small flash in the pan.
You know, my special commendation to you for, in the pandemic, I know a lot of actors, a lot of theater personalities who got frustrated, who got fed up. Oh, lockdown, I cannot perform and this, that. But in the army, I learned when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Seeing you, Sanjoy, I would say, when the going gets tough, the tough gets online. So you did online theater, and that is something really creative, innovative, and I'm sure. So a lot of actors who I know, they say that we did not know how to do technology at all, but we made friends with technology. We started online performances thanks to Sanjoy Roy. Sanjay, really, I mean, you have done commendable work. You are an inspiration to generations to come, and you are an encyclopedia of knowledge and a body of, you can imagine the kind of work that you've been doing and inspiring youngsters like me all over. I hope I'm allowed to call myself a youngster. Anyhow, and
We're the same age.
And Sanjay, I really wish you spread your wings even further and further. And I mean, you are more power, more respect to a personality like you. Thank you very much for sparing your time for us. And any parting message you would like to give to our viewers who are getting inspired by Sanjoy Roy and who have always been inspired by you?
Major, I think the only message is, follow your dream. Many of us dream dreams, but we believe that no, there's a practical part and we have to whatever. But if you don't follow your dream, you're not living your life. We only have one life. We only have one planet. So make sure that you follow your dream, look after the planet, look after each other, and don't spend time so much in negativity or negative thinking. Use positive thought to be able to bring about the change. While my story may seem fantastic to many people, as is yours, Major Shah, your story as well, behind the story, there's all of the struggle, the trials, and the tribulations. The most important thing is don't let it get you down. Uh, Even in your darkest moment, look for a bright, shining light. Your guides and your angels are there to help guide you. Don't resort to violence and hatred. Look to empathy, look to helping somebody, look to reaching out to those who have nothing or have even less than you. And if you look around the world today, whether it's in Afghanistan or in Libya or Syria, or look what's happening in Ukraine, or in Ethiopia and the Tigris, I mean, there's devastation and there's death, and there's great economic ruin that faces so many people. And I think each one of us uh, who have the ability, we must bring about a difference. We must contribute to creating a difference to the planet, to our fellow brotherhood, to our friends and our family, and to anybody who we feel we can help. We must reach out. So let's spend time doing that, not necessarily only looking for the shivlings under masjids and mosques and wasting your time there, but really looking to the positive. And there's so much positive in the world. Uh, there's so much incredible things, magic that happens around us. But a lot of the times we don't see it. And because we don't see it, we're not able to understand that what we have is truly inspirational and magical.
Sanjay, thank you so much for your time, and you've been really sweet and kind. Thank you very much. Like always, very gracious of you. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, Sanjay.
Many thanks. Thank you, Major. Take care.
Really
Bye.
enjoyed being in conversation with you. Really learned a lot. Thank
Bye.
you.